my name is Vivienne Giebels. I'm a ninth grader from Newport Beach, California, and this is my research on GrokAI. For what I'm going to be going over today, so first is a short introduction, then I'll be going over the research brief, the experimental investigation, the application design proposal. I will conclude, and lastly, the time for questions and feedback. So introduction. So my asset class is credit and the industry is healthcare. And I chose Grok AI for this project because of Grok AI's ability to summarize media. And it goes really in depth and provides really high quality responses. And also I also found Grok AI interesting because of its unique connection with the social media platform X. And now into the research brief. So the key features of Grok AI are first, its ability to summarize media. Second, its ability to write code in real time. And third, its access to the World Wide Web and X. And now to the initial exploration. So this is a QR code that links to my chats with Grok AI. And I did 4 different inputs. So this is the first input. It is a neutral-based input, and I inputted some patient information such as the credit score as well as recent medical bills. And I asked Grok AI how this credit profile is generally interpreted and what it suggests about the patient's financial reliability. And the second input is a role-based prompt input, and I gave Grok AI the role of a hospital billing administrator. I inputted the same patient information from input 1 as well as the same question. And now for input number 3, I asked Grok AI to analyze an article that discussed how AI can be used in credit and healthcare. And my fourth input was I did the same question, patient information, and same role as input number 2, but I asked it to answer in only 2 or 3 sentences. And now for the critical analysis. So I found multiple strengths, but also some weaknesses. One of Grok AI's biggest strengths was its ability to respond to role-based prompts. I found that when you gave Grok AI a role, it provided really high quality answers and went really into depth while also considering both ethical risk and financial risk and balancing it. The second strength I found was Grok AI's ability to analyze media. In response to the article, Grok AI did a really fantastic job of doing a thorough summary as well as interpreting the article and like future implications. And then I did find some weaknesses, which were how Grok AI responds to neutral prompts. Grok AI, I don't know if you could tell, but just from by the looks of it, the inputs that are very short in comparison. So this is the neutral input, and just visually, it's very short as compared to the second input, which is the role-based input, and also just was not as in-depth and didn't provide as thorough of a comparison of ethical risk and financial risk. And then it also struggles with output length. So while it did stick to 3 sentences, they were very long, and I just don't recommend using Grok AI specifically for just a short summary. And now to the experimental investigation. So first question hypothesis, my question was, how does the framing of the prompt affect my AI's prioritization? And the hypothesis was, if a role-based prompt is entered, Grok AI will prioritize both ethics and facts. And this is the methodology. So my variable is prompt-based framing, so role-based prompts versus neutral-based prompts. And I measured how high quality the responses were, as well as how it balanced ethical risk as well as financial risk. And this is another QR code to the other project for the experimental investigation in the inputs. So now to the inputs. I had four different inputs. The first input was a role-based prompt, and I gave Grok AI the role of a hospital billing administrator, and I gave it some credit information. I gave it some patient information, and then I asked Grok AI how the following credit information would influence the payment plan or financial assistance options the hospital offers. And this is the second role-based prompt. I gave Grok AI the role of the CFO of a hospital, managing financial risk. And I gave it the same patient information as input number one. And I asked, what are some financial and ethical factors that should guide the billing decisions? Now, input number three, this is a direct variation of the first prompt, except this is neutral based and does not have the role of the hospital billing administrator. And just visually, again, you can already see that this is way smaller response compared to the first one, which was the role-based one. And now for input number four, which was another neutral based prompt, and it was a direct variation of the second input about the financial risk as well as ethical risk. And now for the results. So for patterns, I found that role-based prompts, they generated longer answers just visually. I just noticed that immediately. And they also provided way more high quality outputs. And they also had a nice balance between financial risk and ethical risk in comparison to the neutral-based prompts. I also found that all of Grok AI's outputs were in sections and bullet points, so it doesn't really generate paragraphs generally. So that would be something that you'd have to ask for. But for surprises, the fourth input, when I asked Grok AI, this was the neutral-based prompt about financial and ethical risk. It did consider some ethical risk, however, was not as much as the role-based, but it was still surprised that it considered it a little bit. And then for the best inputs, if you can tell by now, it is the role-based inputs and they provide just the most high quality and in-depth responses. And now for the interpretation. So my hypothesis was proved to be correct that the role-based inputs did generate the best outputs. And so for recommendations to investors is to just use the role-based inputs instead of neutral ones because um, they just have more of a balance between financial risk and ethical risk, which is really essential in the financial industry. And then for design recommendations, while I was researching, I um, I was thinking about how the neutral based prompts um, really did not consider ethical risk as much as they should have. And I tied this back to Grok AI's unique connection to the controversial social media platform X and how it takes a lot of its information from X and has unlimited access. So, and uses it for most of its responses. And and while this connection to X can be good, I, and it provides real-time information, which is really essential in the financial industry. I figured that it would be better if Grok AI focused more on getting information from more neutral and reputable sources because X does have a lot of controversial people on there who are very opinionated, and this can skew Grok AI's outputs. And so my recommendation is for Grok AI to just use more neutral sources in its responses, but it should still have that connection to X because that does differentiate itself from other AI tools, and that's what makes Grok AI unique. And for the application design proposal. So application proposal. So I think that Grok AI does a really good job of summarizing media, and this can be very essential when working with a team. And this really helps users optimize their time so they can focus on other tasks. But I do recommend cross-checking with other AI tools or even just skimming the media yourself um, there's always the chance of hallucinations or bias, but more specifically for Grok AI can have skewed responses because of its connection to X and can blend real financial information with the information that it finds from the social media platform. And then for the impact forecast, this is really helpful for investors because of the time saved, where investors can focus on more uniquely human tasks. And I think this can be essential for all different types of investors and all the financial industries. But I do think it would be best for infrastructure because infrastructure does have a lot of legal documents they have to go through. So I think it would be really essential for that section. But and then I do think that there should be a balance between humans and AI when using AI, and that AI isn't really the solution for everything, and there's always the chance of hallucinations and bias and things like that. So it's really essential to just have a balance between how much you use it. And now to conclude. So my key takeaways from this are that I learned many limitations, but also many strengths that AI does have. And like I said earlier, I do there should be a balance between humans and AI and how we use it, and we should use it thoughtfully. Thank you.
Hi, Vivienne, this is such an amazing presentation. I thought your interest of like healthcare building, that's very interesting. And I was just wondering, especially about the ethical aspect, does Grok AI ever like explain to you how it's thinking about whether a decision is ethical or not? Or does it consider like government regulation, things like that, when it kind of gives you that really long paragraph about how to build a patient?
So thank you, and that's a really good question. I think for role-based prompts, it does provide like it will have different sections that are like equally balanced on the financial risk that it gives and the ethical risk. But when you are doing the neutral-based prompts, it only really has a sentence on it. Um, and consider it just considers like how the patient would be affected and the consequences that it has. And yeah.
Oh, that was a really great presentation. Um, you mentioned that Grok takes a lot of its information from X, and that's really good for like current, like specific, like current information, especially from like a lot of different users. That kind of reminds me of like people using Reddit to see what's going on within smaller communities. And I guess outside of even healthcare or like investment, what for like your research with Grok, what research opportunities do you think would be very useful for using Grok?
Thank you. That's a good question. I haven't really thought about that too much, but I think that Grok could be useful for many things. I guess yeah, for specifically for like summarizing media can be used for anything, but because of its connection to X, it can be used for anything that's more real-time events because that's the one unique factor. So like financial industry, like it's very volatile and changes a lot. So it's things like that where it's really quick to change. I think it could be anything for that type of industry.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Vicky. That was really good. My question is actually really similar to Tasha's. It was about how Grok AI specifically like uses sources from X. And I was wondering, how does that put Grok at an advantage over other AI tools when we're like using it in this very term?
Thank you, and that's a really good question as well. I think because X just gets information in real time because other sources like ChatGPT and Claude and everything like that, they have to wait to get their information from when articles are published or other sources have everything out. So by having its connection to X, it can get those real time the real-time information because people post like almost immediately as soon as they hear something, and that's one reason why it can be really helpful.
I had a question about how the AI, or if you know how the AI uses X as a database, specifically because although sometimes more credible users and like industry professionals are publishing information on the site, but on the other end of the spectrum, there can also be instances of, people who aren't industry professionals. So during your research, did you ever see that Grok AI specifically noted who the information was coming from in the output, specifically when it said that, it's using information from X.
So that's a good question. At the bottom. like after it answers, it has like the links of where the information came from, but everything almost always came from X, or at least I was always involved in the responses. Um, I might have that in my screenshots. I can go back, but um, no, it doesn't really say it, but at the bottom there's little like bubble type things. It doesn't say specifically which information comes from X, which I think would be very useful as like a design recommendation is to specify which information comes from X so they know, okay, this might not be as reliable, or I should wait until I hear more information on this to see if this is actually true.
I have a question. I don't know if it's less of a question and more just like an emphasis of something you already mentioned, but I just wanted your thoughts on it. So do you think like Grok AI's like ability when you're like doing a role play prompt to kind of focus more on the ethics side, do you think it would make it like less of a good tool for professions that don't really consider ethics as much, or ethics aren't as big of a focal point? Because I know like in medicine and everything, obviously ethics are a bit more of a focal point than in like cinema and construction or something like that.
I think the role-based prompts can be used for when ethics want to be more considered, but if they're not being considered, then I think the neutral-based prompts would work. I guess just like I was just researching this because specifically in my scenario with my industry, healthcare, ethics is very important, kind of like you mentioned in your question. So that's why I think the role-based prompts are important. But yeah, for like any industry that doesn't really consider it, they can just maybe use the neutral-based prompts when they have questions.